Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /Entitled People, where people seem to think the world revolves around them and no one else matters. And in today's episode, it's all about nightmare neighbors causing trouble. We've got tantrums being thrown, trespassers, spying neighbors, and a lot more. So sit back, relax, and seriously, try not to shake your heads too much today. Let's dive in, guys. So a few years ago, I bought a house, and I never went around to officially introduce myself. I eventually started meeting some neighbors from being outside while doing yard work. I consider myself polite, quiet, don't have crazy parties, people aren't coming and going all hours of the night, and I mind my own business. So that said, about a year of living in my home, my neighbor from across the street, whom I've never interacted with or officially met, marches over and she knocks on my door. At first, I didn't know who she was, so I decided not to answer. She eventually yells through the door and she asked, why won't I come talk to her? I turn my doorbell camera on and I say, hello, I'm not able to come to the door, but I asked what I could do for her. Well, she then goes into a full-blown tirade of how she's never met me, she never sees lights on inside my house, and that she's concerned that it sits empty most days. I'm fairly shocked by this, given that I've never met her nor seen her before. And I do in fact live in the house I purchased. This is when I ask which house she's from, and that sets her over the edge. She starts yelling about being my neighbor and how rude it is that I've never introduced myself to her. I'm of course confused because I don't know which house she's from, and again politely asked for clarification. This causes her to yell at me saying, if you don't know who I am, that's your fault and you shouldn't be here. You need to move. And with that, she walked away. I was so shaken up that I didn't go out the rest of the day. The next day, I decided to try to smooth things over. She was passive-aggressive, but she thanked me for finally coming over and stated that's all she really wanted, and I've never seen her in person again. But it doesn't end there. Ever since that day, I've experienced her calls to the police, claiming things like I egged her house when no eggs were found on the house, I stole some kind of light fixture from their front yard, and my personal favorite, that I threw a party so loud it woke her up in the middle of the night. All things I absolutely didn't do. Eventually, the police did tell her that she'll get fined if she keeps wasting their time. Not too long ago, I noticed their dog was running up and down the street with no collar on. I was able to collect him and I walked him over to her house. A different neighbor saw the whole thing and a few days later came over to tell me how horrible these people have been to me, and they've been spreading rumors about me kidnapping their dog and that I only brought it back because I was caught. I don't plan on moving anytime soon, but neighbors from hell are truly the worst, and I don't enjoy my yard nor my deck anymore. Hopefully, when I do find the motivation to sell, I'll be able to find neighbors who aren't completely entitled and insane. What a post that was, guys, and a lot of comments are saying that OP needs to keep living their life and not let a nasty Karen live rent-free in their head. And I agree so much with that, because you know what would drive a person like her crazy? The fact that somebody who she hates is living their best life and they aren't miserable. That said though, OP should have turned it around on Karen and said, ma'am, I was actually mad for a year that you didn't welcome me to the neighborhood. Guys, let me know your thoughts on this post. So here's some background. I've had some issues with neighbors on all three sides of me, encroaching, storing stuff, and dumping on my property. I've handled two of them. One was super nice about it, but the other is a complete jerk. My neighbors rented the house next door for 10 years, and I purchased my home 8 months ago. The renter's constantly deploying a ladder coming off the shed about 3 feet into my yard. There's no reason to keep a deployed ladder on my property to access his shed roof. It's a liability and a hazard. Meanwhile, he's complained about me cleaning up my property while dumping yard debris onto it. He complains about my dog, and he just keeps coming onto my yard for no reason. On Friday morning, I come off a rough shift at work, and the ladder was in my yard again. I took it down, and I put up a no trespassing sign. On Saturday morning at about 7:30, the renter's tearing up my flower bed, and he's throwing the plants and pavers over the fence. He stops when I ask him to, and he curses me out. I get some coffee, take the dog for a walk, and take photos of the damage. I sat down around 9 o'clock to message his landlord, and that's when this idiot renter starts setting off fireworks. I of course reported to the landlord and went about my day. The advice from my boyfriend was to wait for the landlord, while my brother advised me to call police. At 2 p.m., I hadn't heard back from the landlord, and I considered filing a non-emergency report, but I find out I'd have to wait till Monday to do so. At 3:30, the landlord messages me that he'll talk to his tenant and he'll be checking in with me when he got off work. At around 4 o'clock, I'm outside playing with my dog when this neighbor stomps up to me, cursing at me and yelling in my face because I reported him to his landlord. The guy's saying that I'll regret the day I chose to mess with him. He sets off more fireworks and he pulls his car to where he torn up my flower bed, and the guy starts blasting his music. And I do have to admit, it was like watching a train wreck. I just couldn't look away from it. The guy was going from one bizarre activity to the next in pretty rapid succession. I didn't engage, I just FaceTimed my boyfriend, took a video, and reported everything in real time to the landlord via text and photos. I figured the best thing would be to get out of there, as I was getting scared at this point. Between doing things, the guy was still screaming about this dumb bitch not knowing who she's messing with. I went 2 doors down to a neighbor's house. He's retired and he lives with aging parents. He's friendly with this renter, and he said it was out of character and figured there might be something deeper to go nuts like this, and he went to check in on him. About 30 minutes later, when he came back, he let me know that the guy was still there blasting music in his car, muttering about me, but he appeared calm. That's when I asked if calling the police would escalate or diffuse this situation, and he thought it may amplify it and that I should continue checking in with his landlord. I hung out with my dog and the neighbors for about an hour and a half more. They are fun neighbors, and we had a good time chatting, and they put my mind at ease. At about 7:30, my neighbor walked me home. He stayed for a bit, just to make sure the renter was gone. He didn't come back that night, and I haven't seen him since. And to that I say good riddance, because an unhinged, potentially violent neighbor like that who has you on their radar is not something you want. Also, who else agrees that OP should have called the cops at 7:30 in the morning? Like when you come home to someone destroying your property and getting aggressive with you, that's when you call the cops. And this person comments, sue the landlord. I've had neighbors like this. It's schizophrenia mixed in with a lot of drugs. Report both the landlord and the tenant to the authorities. Report him to county psychiatric too if you have that where you're at. So my mother has Alzheimer's disease. I try to spend at least 3 days a week at my parents' house to help out. Recently, I came over after a 2-week work trip away, and I saw this strange car in the driveway on the side I usually park. I went inside and I asked my dad who was visiting. He said no one's visiting, the neighbors had just started parking there. Now this made no sense to me, so I kept prodding as to why they'd spontaneously take it upon themselves to park in our driveway. My dad finally breaks down and he says, yeah, well, apparently, this a-hole said your mother told them it was okay. That's when I asked if he'd told the neighbors that there was a misunderstanding. He said he had, but they didn't seem to get it, nor did they seem to care. I gave the neighbors the benefit of the doubt at first. My dad's a great guy, but sometimes he can be a little too nice. I figured he hadn't been quite clear enough with the neighbors out of concern for being impolite. So I went over there, and I even brought some chocolates to try to smooth things out. I knocked, and no one answered, even though it was obvious they were home. I just kept at it, getting frustrated at this point. Finally, this woman comes to the door and she opens it barely a centimeter before shouting at me saying, "We're not interested, go away," and then closing it again. I just stood there and I explained who I was, but nothing. Eventually, I just went home. I lingered by the window for the next few hours, hoping to catch someone when they came out of the house. It wasn't till a couple of days later that I was able to intercept the man completely by chance. We were both coming out of our house at the same time, and at first, he wanted to avoid me, but then realized his car was in my driveway, so he had no choice. I still tried to be friendly though. I introduced myself and I told him that my mother really wasn't well and anything she told him could not be taken at face value. I said we did need both parking spots. The guy kind of nodded and he yesed a lot, but I got the feeling this wasn't the end of it when he left. Sure enough, there weren't any problems the next few days, but eventually, I did have to go back to work. The first day I was gone, my dad calls me and he mentioned they were parked there again. I tracked down their phone number and I called, but shocker, they didn't pick up. I came back a day earlier than planned, and sure enough, there was the car. And that's when I went over to the house, all facade of friendliness gone. The woman of the couple comes to the window. She clearly saw it was me and she didn't answer. So I end up calling the police. I just told them that my neighbor had parked in my driveway and they were ignoring my request to move. An officer came down and took my side of the story and then knocked on the neighbor's door. The woman had the nerve to continue ignoring the cop. The cop didn't have time to be playing those games. He just pounded on the door and basically ordered everyone out of the house. Eventually, the husband comes out, but he's huffing and puffing, acting like it's the most major inconvenience he's ever experienced. The officer then says to him, "Your neighbors need you to move your vehicle from their property." The guy then starts trying to claim that he's allowed to leave his car there because he has a verbal contract with my mother, who again has dementia, and I told the officer that, obviously. The neighbor was really feeling himself at this point. The guy's playing lawyer, but that's when the cop stops him and basically says, "That was then, this is now. Now they want you to move it. Move it or it's going to be towed." The neighbor keeps arguing though. He says he knows the law and they have to talk to a lawyer to do this and do that. The police officer then reiterated that he had two choices, to move it or get towed. The neighbor then blurts out, "But we have a new car, and if we move this back there, there won't be enough space." At that point, the cop was done playing games. He was on the phone with the tow people. That's when they finally went to move the car. The cop told the neighbors if they brought their car back over again, they would be trespassing, and that we had full rights to have someone immediately tow it away. Since then, the neighbors are whining and they're trying to tell others in the neighborhood that we were in the wrong, and we misled them, but luckily, no one's falling for it. Guys, the absolute audacity of those neighbors to try to play victim after that. Right? And shame on them for taking advantage of OP's mom, especially after OP told them she has Alzheimer's. Also, I love how the officer immediately dealt with that BS. I don't care what was said, they want you off now. Guys, let me know your thoughts though. Who would have had them towed immediately after the first time and not put up with that crap? And this person comments and they share a short story on how they dealt with an entitled neighbor. So my neighbor, who lives across the street and 2 houses down, loves to park his giant work van or his converted horse trailer in front of my house, usually inches from my driveway. The problem is the angle and slope of my driveway. We can't see around the giant van, and we've almost gotten hit multiple times while pulling out. And have I asked him to park in front of his own house? Yes, I have. And is there space to park in front of his house? Also, yes. The guy also has a very long driveway that could park 6+ vehicles. Lastly, are there other open parking spots on the street? Plenty. So after our teenager almost got into a collision trying to pull out of our driveway a couple of weeks ago, I had it with his giant van. I went searching the auto salvage Craigslist for a cheap car that runs. I figured our insurance deductible is $1,000. And if I can find something that's $300 to $500, it's sunk costs. I got a 90s Dodge Neon for $400 and I parked it in front of my house all week. It costs $30 to register annually and no smog check due to its age. And our insurance is going up like $7 a quarter. As I drove home today, guess who had both their trailer and giant work van in their own driveway? I consider that a victory. This is one I hope you'll enjoy. My 39 female and my husband, 49 male, moved into this house in 2018. The neighbor in question technically lives on the cross street to ours, but our driveway is adjacent to her backyard. When we moved in, we were under the impression that the property extended about 3 to 4 feet-ish beyond the edge of our driveway, which was fine. We've used this as a guide for where we want to mow that strip of lawn. Generally, we would mow 3 mower widths, and it was never an issue. This lady's in her 60s or 70s, I'm not really sure. And like I said, we've never had a problem at all. I had a few brief conversations with her, and the same with my husband during the first couple of years we lived there. Not really enough to consider them acquaintances, but enough to be civil and give the occasional wave. Her husband passed away in 2020 or 2021, I really can't remember. And since then, she's hired a lawn care service to mow, leaf blow, all that stuff. At the time, my husband worked second shift, so we would sleep in a bit most days until 10 o'clock or so. Our bedroom is adjacent to our driveway, and the way the room is, the only way to put a bed was with the head along that wall. But that wall has 2 huge windows, and it's an older house, and the windows are thin. That meant we start getting woken up at 7 a.m. weekly to a lawnmower and leaf blower right outside our window. Finally, my husband checked it out, and he found the lawn boy was driving his riding lawnmower up and down our driveway to access her yard, and the guy was standing in our driveway to blow leaves. This would literally be less than 10 feet from our heads as we slept. My husband had enough, so he went out and he got this guy's attention. My husband told him, "Look, this is my driveway. You can't just use our driveway as easy access to her yard because it's convenient." The kid, who was around 20 years old, apologized, and ever since then, this lady was out to get us. About a year later, my teenager was raking leaves. He was putting them on our side, and she comes out and she starts yelling at him, saying they're on her lawn. He said he thought our property was from the telephone pole over, and she said it wasn't. Whatever. Maybe a month later, I was returning from the store, and I saw that she was trying to pick up sticks in her yard. The way she moves makes it clear she has back issues, like she can't bend and she has to crouch and reach. I asked her from my driveway, "Hey, Mrs. So-and-so, do you want some help?" There was no answer, so I thought maybe she didn't hear me. So this time, I said it louder, "Hey, Mrs. So-and-so." She turns around just to scream at me saying, "No," with an attitude. So I thought, fine. I went inside and I figured she was still salty about this whole lawn boy situation. A few months ago, my husband was hosing out the trash can, and he dumps the water along the edge of our street on our strip of land. The street has storm gutters because we get a lot of rain. Well, she had a fit about this and she came out to yell at him. My husband just told her he isn't some kid she can yell at and leave him alone. And this is where it gets good. Within a week, she hires a guy to survey the land. Come to find out, her land ends on just the opposite side of the telephone pole, which gives her like 5 feet less of land. She's all but hurt about it, but whatever. About a week or so later, it's evening. I'm packing up the car for my husband to go to work, as he's on nights now. I kind of just glance in the direction of her house as I start the car, and I see her and some guy just standing at the window staring at me. I'm literally doing the same thing I do every night when I pack up the car, so I don't know what the deal was. I come inside and I tell my husband that these people are standing there being creepy, and it's unnerving. He goes out to put something in the car, and this guy comes out of her house. He marches over to my husband, screaming at him how we're harassing her and all of that. My husband just tells the guy to back off. I'm just trying to get ready for work. In the end, the police get called, and it's a whole dumb thing. Her and this guy get trespassed off our property, and my husband gets trespassed off her property. I stayed inside during this whole police talk, so I didn't get anything. The woman's literally crying to the cop that we have cameras looking into her windows and that we're spying on her. My husband tells the police that we have security cameras for the same reasons most people do, in case something happens. Like we give a crap about what's going on in her place. The officer tells her that we can have 100 cameras if we want. She of course wasn't happy about that. Last week, she had the city do a survey. They put little flags where the gas line or whatever is, so I assume she's gonna build a fence. She then cuts down this huge bush in her yard that's always been there. So again, we're getting excited that she's gonna build a fence. On Monday morning at 6 a.m., she's standing in her window watching me put our garbage can to the curb. Today, her daughter comes up and she puts up a security camera pointing into our garage area and backyard, which she can't even see until they cut the bush down. We're cracking up because it's effing hilarious. So of course, my husband now intends to get 3 more cameras for that side of the house, and also a few more in the front to freak her out even more. Maybe we're being petty a-holes, but I think it's mostly funny, especially since it all started because of us not wanting people in our driveway. Also, for those mentioning a potential for dementia, I really don't know. I haven't spoken to her in a couple of years. However, her daughters are there several hours every week. If there is a concern of dementia and/or delusion, they need to seek some kind of treatment for her. Update. So she had the fence built. My husband was out clearing leaves off his car in the evening after the construction was finished. This isn't unusual. He always clears the leaves off the car while getting ready to leave for work. Well, out she came. I couldn't see her as I was on the back patio, but she was screaming like a frickin' lunatic saying, "Stay away from my effing fence. Get away from my effing fence." And my personal favorite, "Leave that fence alone, you son of a bitch. If you touch it, I will call the police." We're happy that she built a fence and my husband wasn't touching it. And what does she think he's gonna do? Like knock the thing over? We have zero intention of vandalizing her fence or her property. I just find it super silly and even unhinged that she puts up a fence which in my mind says, this is my side and that's yours. But then she proceeds to scream at my husband for being on our side. He didn't say anything back because he didn't want to give her a reason to call the cops or whatever. So that's it for now. We'll see if anything else happens next. So there's around 10 houses in my neighborhood of 120 that are not in the HOA, mine included. We were smart enough to not join the HOA. As a result, I'm able to make extensions and I have a pool, which I host neighborhood parties occasionally. That being said, my HOA is one of the worst HOAs. They're constantly fining people hundreds of dollars for parking violations, painting their fences the wrong shades of brown, wrong color curtains, having 2 flags, all that stuff. They're not the worst HOA, but they're up there. We also have a crappy neighbor who I'll call Jessica. She likes to go around and snap photos of people's violations, and then post it on the Nextdoor app to shame them. She prides herself in this, thinking it makes the neighborhood better when she shames the Smiths for having a fence that's 2 inches too high, or the Johnsons for having a light brown door instead of a dark brown door. What I'm trying to say is Jessica is an effing C-word. She's probably costing the neighbors thousands of dollars in fees or forcing them to renovate. I absolutely lost my lid when Jessica posted in the Nextdoor app about how Mrs. Jensen, this nice 85-year-old woman who's currently having serious medical issues, has a lawn that's way too high that she never mows. She obviously can't mow the lawn and she was too busy to notice. The HOA fined her $500. So I made a post in the Nextdoor app saying that I'm having a giant party at my house and that none of the nasty people on the HOA nor Jessica were invited to the barbecue at my house. Jessica then goes on a rant saying how much of an angel she is and how she protects the neighborhood and that she's just doing her duty and it's not fair that she's being excluded. I just told her that she's a low-life scumbag busybody and she's a pathetic loser with nothing better to do. A couple of people did say that I was bullying and excluding her, and 4 of her friends are boycotting my stupid party and they're hosting their own party. Well, that party happened and nobody else showed up to theirs and ours was a blast. She apparently cried over it. Maybe now she'll learn a lesson, guys, because people like her are the worst for neighborhoods. Like, how can a person like that sleep at night knowing that they're the reason an elderly woman was fined $500? Like, what if she couldn't afford to pay it, right? Like, being a part of the HOA committee, I might get, but a person who just wants to cause trouble for others and then cries when she's excluded, I'm glad OP stood their ground and didn't tolerate that BS. And guys, while we're on the topic of HOA Karens, this person shares a relatable post. Listen to this. This is one that you may find funny. This started 2 years ago. My neighbor Gary reported me to the HOA because my trash cans were, quote, visible from the street on a non-trash day. I got a $50 fine, and that's when I said, okay, Gary, okay. This is when I decided to get petty. Every Wednesday night, I set an alarm for 3 a.m. I go outside in dark clothes and I move his trash cans about 6 inches to the left. That's it, 6 inches, and then go back to bed. The first few months, he didn't notice, and then one morning, I see him standing in his driveway just staring at them. He moved them back, and next Wednesday, another 6 inches. The guy starts putting a rock in front of them to mark the spot. I moved the rock too. After that, he installs a Ring camera. I approach from the blind spot behind his bushes, because I know his yard better than he does at this point. Last summer, his wife comes over to ask my wife if we've noticed anything strange in the neighborhood. My wife said no, and I was standing right there eating a granola bar. I just nodded. And here's the comical part. In October, he had the house blessed. I watched as a priest walked through his front door. I saw them standing in the driveway praying over the trash cans, and I almost felt bad. Almost. He started bringing the trash cans inside his garage now. So I've pivoted to moving his welcome mat 2 inches every week instead. And the thing is, I will never stop. I don't even remember what being normal feels like. The HOA created me. Throughout the year, I've had noisy and thoughtless neighbors. They would often have loud parties that would go on until the early hours of the morning. They were all in university and of Indian descent, and this is important later on. I had called the police, called the apartment manager, but nobody would do anything about it. I was losing sleep, and my work was becoming affected as well. I had spoken to them directly, and they completely disregarded me, and they refused to shut up. This went on for months. I was just riding out my lease to move somewhere else. One day, I'm sitting watching TV on a nice spring day. I have my windows wide open, and that's when I hear one of the neighbor's friends come over. He asked if he's coming out, and he says no, he needs to study for an important test he's taking the next day. This little snippet of information was all I needed. His friend leaves, and he closes the door. I then proceed to take my speakers, and I put them up against the walls, near where I knew his desk was. I began to blare death metal straight at the wall. I put my noise-canceling headphones on, and I blasted it as loud as possible for hours. My landlord ends up coming into the apartment because I didn't hear him knocking. The guy's obviously flipping out, but I just said to him, "You never did anything when I complained, so good luck. Call the cops." My lease was set to be up soon anyways, and I was leaving the state, so I thought, F you guys. The landlord leaves, and I'm still amped up on adrenaline. It's quiet for maybe 20 minutes, and that's when I start intermittently blasting music. The neighbor comes over irate, screaming that he has a big test and he's gotta pass it. Apparently, he's a medical student. I just laughed in his face and I said, I don't hear anything. He then makes a fantastic mistake. He told me he didn't just have a final tomorrow, but it was finals week. Well, knowing that, I continue doing this every night the rest of the week. I even set my alarm to go off every 30 minutes, and I would bang on the walls with a hammer, blast music. I would do whatever I could to make his life hell. And I want to add, I was going a bit crazy as well, but that didn't matter because I was mucking up this guy's life. Around day 3 of no sleep for anyone, the guy comes over screaming how his family in India will disown him and all of that nonsense, which just made me laugh even more, and I just said the same thing over and over. that I didn't hear the music and I think it was coming from somewhere else. I basically start gaslighting him, acting really nice when he came over in a rage. That weekend, the landlord gave me some BS notice that I had to leave, which I was fine with, because he broke my lease and I wanted to get out anyways, so I got my deposit back. On the last morning I was there, I was moving out, and I knocked on my neighbor's door at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I asked him if he wanted this old air conditioner I was gonna throw out. The guy was totally in a daze, and I don't know if he really understood what was happening any longer. Anyways, hopefully, I messed up his life and his future a bit. The guy should have shut up when I told him numerous times. Guys, I just love the fact that OP couldn't care less about the eviction, and I too hope the entitled medical student learned a lesson. But yeah, I think the takeaway from all of these stories is don't start trouble if you don't want trouble. Like, just be a decent neighbor, right? But I guess it is r/entitled people, where some people truly think they're the center of the universe. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/malicious compliance episode where psycho bosses are getting absolutely destroyed. And the stories are hilarious, guys. Go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.